Hello and welcome to the Record Players podcast, objectively the best opinion in music. I am Dennis.
Hi, my name's Harry.
I'm Jack.
And we very, very slowly review albums. And today we're going to be reviewing Isles. I have to roll with the punches. Today we're going to be reviewing Isles by Bicep, which was released, I think, on the 21st of January. I'll confirm that in a second.
A couple of weeks, we're getting there.
It is Bicep's second album, full-length album, following Bicep, their self-titled album in 2017. They released a couple of EPs and vinyls here and there before that, but this is their second full-length album that they've released. Bicep, if you don't know, they are a DJ and production duo from Belfast. They do what would you call it? Mixes of house music, EDM, dance music, but they also produce their own house music, EDM, dance music. They've been around on the scene for a number of years, probably since about 2012. In 2012, they won DJ Mag's Best British Newcomer for that year. And today we're going to be reviewing the Isles album. So I quite like this album. I thought it was fitting for the time of year that we're in here in the UK. It's dark, it's melancholic, we have short days, and we have a lot of overcast, dark and dreary days, and that's not the type of music where you want to be listening to Guns N' Roses or something a bit more uplifting.
I was going to say, though, pick any month in the UK and that sentence could probably still apply.
Absolutely.
Maybe not June, but every other month.
Absolutely. The weather is the number one topic of discussion in the UK in general. So, Hadi, give me your initial thoughts about this album.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with Bicep at all, so this was a first listen for me. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the kind of majority of the tracks that I heard here. There was excellent kind of sound design, production elements, lots of kind of garage beats, which I really fucked with. I really enjoyed the kind of syncopated elements between the kind of the drum beats and the synths. There was always something that was going on that was a bit like off kilter, which really got to me. Upon first and repeated listens, but this is just the thing. I feel I'm really glad that we're reviewing an electronic music project, deviating from the rock and hip hop that we've been focusing on already. It's nice to go into a different genre, but this album is a prime example for me of how electronic music doesn't always work in an album format, because I liked the majority of tracks I heard, but by the kind of latter half, I was kind of getting bored, and I kind of felt like the album was it had established a framework for a song, and then repeated it and repeated it and repeated it, and there were slight deviations and bits that I enjoyed more than others. But I don't know, I just don't feel like this kind of music can hold up in an album format, where it's very hard to, especially with the lack of. Yeah, especially with the lack of features. I mean, I know there's a few vocal features here, but there's only one track, which was my standout favorite. What was the track? Saku. Yeah, that was my standout favorite, because that had a full vocal feature in terms of, verse, chorus, a clear, defined, lyrics and melody, and that was almost like it's like almost like a palate cleanser or a break between I don't want to say monotony, but kind of almost like the repetitive nature of the other tracks. So I kind of wish there was more of that kind of style of song on there.
Yeah, there's a couple of tracks as well which had sort of strange vocal samples. Apricots and Reva, which had like those vocal samples.
I hated the apricot sample.
Yeah, which it kind of pisses me off when you can't understand it. Yeah, so Jack, hot take. What were your initial thoughts about this album?
This is a shit album. Like,
hands down, just gonna throw.
God damn.
No, they're like this isn't my type of music anyway. But I didn't know it was this type of music when I first listened to it. So I went in with a completely open mind, I'll say. The second time I went in, I enjoyed it more because my expectations were so low from my first listen. There's a few tracks that I can pick out where I'm like, yeah, I like it. It's good. Like, again, yeah, Saku is a standout track because it's got a vocal on it. There's something to latch onto and actually listen to, and it changes. It develops like a song does. It reminded me a little bit of Submotion Orchestra at some points. They did a little bit of like sub playing around with the vocal up here, and I liked that. Like, that space was great. The one thing they do really, really well on the album is making these soundscapes. Like Hattie was saying before, like their choice of instruments and like, it's a bit, I think it's a bit basic in my opinion, but like these really like airy synths that make big spaces and then having like a phase or an LFO cut in and out, so it's like this, so you get a nice pulse to give it some rhythm. Like, it makes a nice space, but it's super basic. It's like, you know what I mean? It's not
they have a framework that they
rinse and repeat.
And like every track, it feels like there's a foundation that they repeat. You've got like a kind of garage beat, and then there's like ambient synths, and then high pitched synth, and generally like a sample that's kind of like off timed.
It's kind
of like minor variations on that same theme.
It sounded like the playlist that Morpheus would listen to in his downtime in Zion. As well, I just kept going back to all the time. It was like The Matrix on K or something. Where they're falling asleep.
If in terms of, it's strong words with what you've said. So you said a shit album. Now I kind of feel like that's a bit harsh. Now in terms of kind of, if you ask me like, do I enjoy the general kind of vibe or palette that Bicep put across? Yes. Do I think it works in an album format? No. That's how I would kind of phrase it. So, but I don't know if I would go to the lengths of what you're saying is shit, because I think the production is of a high quality.
But that's why it's disappointing. That's why it's disappointing. Like, the production is fantastic. All the mastering, the choice of sounds, the different timbres they're mixing together. Like you said, they've done some interesting things with syncopation in different tracks, but it just never hits the level it should. Like, for me, we'll get onto this later, but Atlas, besides the vocals that come on other tracks, Atlas is probably the only one that has any kind of like grabbable melody. There might be one or two others that I've not managed to get a list of.
That's probably one of the most, of the instrumental tracks, that's probably the most interesting, and it does kind of stand out. So I was expecting a different album from that track versus the others. I kind of feel like almost like the latter half, maybe from tracks 8 to 10 at least, it was kind of like this. I was hearing the same thing near the end. But like, Atlas was a good start.
The beginning and then like that middle section is way stronger than the end. The end is a bit of a flop.
I like the first. I mean, that's the thing. Like this would have worked great as like a 5-track EP. I would have been banging this time and time again if they just condensed it.
That's one of my notes. If they took, because like they have a good idea per song. Yeah, they have one like really good idea, and sometimes it's when all the layers are on top of each other and the interplay between them. Sometimes it's one particular track that's just like got a sick effect on it, or it's been manipulated in a cool way, and like it's really good once per song. So if they cut the songs in half and had 2 good ideas per track and a 5-track EP, I'd like this so much more.
Yeah, but That's what they always do, though. That's what I'm saying. Like the issue is, there's a great like sonic palette. It's usually like a really interesting beat, but every track is the same structure. That's probably the thing that annoyed me the most. It starts off with like a cool off-kilter beat, introduces like kind of warm synths, then there's a melody. It's like every track has that same formula. Builds up and then goes down. And I know that's the general kind of vibe of this kind of like electronic. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the general vibe with this electronic music. Electronic music is not generally designed to kind of challenge conventions because it's supposed to fit in a mix. But that's what I'm saying. That's why there's a problem with this fitting into an album. Now, when I look at the electronic albums that I don't know, electronic artists that I enjoy albums from. So, for example, I've enjoyed like Jamie XX or like Subtract, artists like that. Like what they do really well is they utilize a variety of vocal features to keep the interest. So the musical foundation is similar, often similar, but you've got the different vocal features that keep you coming back or keep the variety. So that was very lacking. This album it had like there's 4 listed features, but it was only that Saku where the feature actually took the foreground.
Right. So
I was shocked.
They did release a single sort of EP, and it had 5 tracks. And I'm curious what you guys would think of the composition of these 5 tracks. So it was the EP was Sundial, and it had Sundial, Apricots, Saku, and Atlas on it. Jack, would you listen to that as a 4-track EP?
It's got a higher percentage of tracks that I liked on it. Like Sundial is more rhythmically interesting than most of the album, but it's got like a solid 2 minutes of an idea that's on a lot of their tracks, which is the really like slow arpeggios that just kind of fill in the space instead of having like. I'm just going to talk about that would be better for me. You'd miss out. I liked X as well. I thought that was quite good. I thought.
Yeah, both Clara Lassan tracks would need to be on it.
Yeah, she was like, yeah. If they made a trio and released music like that, yeah, I'd way prefer it. Like it seems like it's like Daft Punk without the vocal feature, or like their looping lyric that gives it context, or like Gorillaz without the vocals coming in ever. It's like all of the like really top successful ones you can think of. That at some point they've had that like that lyric or vocal grab for the audience. 100%. And it's something that in studies that have been done since jazz, because that's when like that kind of flip happened where we swapped from lead instruments to having a lead vocalist in almost everything. There's like people just love hearing human voices. So for me, not being a fan of this style of music inherently, I feel like that was a big disconnect for me listening to this as an album.
I will give some pushback to an opinion that both of you guys have, in that, well, I think conventional dance music and conventional music that's sort of made to be played in the club has like a format, and it's a format that I actually find a little bit annoying because, like you say, it's made to be played in a mix. So it goes in like build up, drop, like does the drop, and then it just repeats the build up and drop again.
Right.
So many like
fades out a bit and then comes back in second time. Like every track on this album kind of follows that same formula.
I don't think so. No, not at all. I would push back on that. I would say that these it doesn't do that. For example, something like Saku doesn't have a drop at all. I don't think. And in fact, like
I agree. So I'm specifically, I guess I will exclude that track because it was by far the standout. But all the instrumental focus tracks do.
I would say they evolve. I would say like the melodic lines evolve, but I wouldn't say they have a traditional drop, and I wouldn't say they follow the same arc.
Well, they don't have like a heavy drop, but that's because it's not that style of music.
But are you just saying that because that's what you're looking for, though? Because
it's not what I'm looking for to make this album better. Like I've already said,
are you looking for that because you're going into it with preconceptions about what dance music is?
Not at all. No, not at
Not
all.
at all, because I didn't hear any drops in this.
Because again, I want to reiterate that I enjoyed the majority of tracks. It's just the format in which this music was consumed. So this album as well, like in terms of hearing these tracks within a mix, if I was like out, it would be sick. I would be like blown away by some of them, or even just. Listening to this album in the background, say if I was doing something else, it would be great. It would be great like ambient music, but the kind of conventional album format, active listening at home, trying to focus on the music and find things to like spark, my endorphins or my serotonin. It just didn't do that after a while. So it's the context. Like I said, I enjoy the music. I just don't like the context.
See, I'll push back against that because I think that's being unfair to Bicep, because I think their last album, by the self-titled Bicep, was much more of a conventional dance album. It had much more like house tracks, sort of that 4 to the floor beat that sort of made to fit into a mix. Whereas I think in this album, I think they deviated more from that, and I think they've only released 2 albums, so I think they are still finding their feet. I mean, they moved to Shoreditch in 2015, and they've sort of been at Shoreditch in sort of in a place similar to Outcast Dungeon, a place where they make music only for the last sort of 5 years. So I would say they are still sort of finding their feet. So I think it's a little unfair. Like I would say this album is sort of going more towards the direction of EDM rather than.
Sorry.
And I would say it's much more similar to sort of Aphex Twin, where it's just. And it's going in that direction. So I think it's unfair to sort of say that they're following sort of conventional dance music sort of arcs.
No, I'm not saying it's conventional. I'm just saying this style of music doesn't necessarily work in an album format, especially when it's missing some elements that can bring change, like a strong vocal. I'm not saying it's necessarily conventional. Like it's the kind of dance music I enjoy. It's just missing 1 or 2 elements to kind of put it up there for me.
I would agree with that, to be honest.
This kind of this style of mid tempo with like eerie dark synths and like like garage, like jittery beats. That's exactly what I like. So it's kind of like, it is like Jack said, it is disappointing in a way. They didn't kind of deliver upon those expectations when it. I know, Jack, you said it's not necessarily the kind of music you like, but for me it is within this genre space. So I was quite disappointed, if anything.
Something that was coming up when I was listening to it with it, because it is in that darker, more ambient space. Because we were talking about it last week as well with this, I just think about The Weeknd and like how much I prefer his take on this kind of dark ambient music. And I think a huge part of it is because he's a very talented singer, but I think a huge part of it is like, even when he's got his most abstract song and it's got all like the grindy noise and the sort of like the interplay between the rhythm is there, and it's not hugely about deep harmonies, whereas like this had the potential to go there, but I don't think they fully explored that sort of stuff. He's always got a catch. He's always got something to grab on to the listener, and I found myself zoning out to this music, but like not in a way that I think is their intention. Do you know what I mean? Because like that could be an end goal, is to have like this is like transcendent music, and you put it on and you sit there and it like takes you away somewhere else. But like with me, I was just checking how long I had left on this track before we moved on to the next one.
But that's what I'm saying. If you had it on in the background, if you're doing something else, if you were like playing a game or something, wouldn't you find it would be better for you? Because obviously,
I was.
But okay, but that's what I'm saying. But like, say for me, when I was doing like my biggest like kind of like my biggest critical listen, where I was making notes, it was just me focusing on the tracks, nothing else. That's where I had the problem. Like, say if I had it in that context, like you, where I was doing something else, I think I would have enjoyed it more. Or like I said, the context of hearing it in a club.
But can you argue that it's good if you have to either be doing something else for it, or like partaking in a social activity, whether you're drinking or not, put that to aside, but like to be there with friends listening to music? My tolerance for bad music is way higher, and I'm not classing this as that, but I'm just saying my tolerance for bad music is way higher if I'm out with my friends, or at a friend's house, and we're like having social interaction as well as the music happening. I feel like unless you can sit down and like objectively draw positives from it repeatedly.
Yeah, it's to me, it's just a handicap on the genre. So there's going to be certain genres where you can or where you're going to get more out of it when you're committed to listening to it on its own, versus genres that appeal in social or other contexts. So this has the handicap where if you're trying to like actively listen to an album of this genre, that it's got to do a lot. It's got to have a lot of diversity or a lot of other interesting things to hold your attention, I think. And this album doesn't live up to that. But I know similar genre albums that do, so I guess I'm comparing it to those.
Well, let's focus this discussion a little bit. Let's move on to our top 3 tracks, and maybe we can sort of pull our opinions and sort of like crystallize our opinions a little bit more from looking at the top 3 tracks.
Yeah.
So my top 3 tracks were Hawk, Saku, and Riva, in that order. Now, Hawk, you guys mentioned Atlas as having a really good melodic line. I thought Hawk, the last track, had the best melodic line. It's the one melodic line that I felt I could latch onto. Like Jack was saying, you're looking for something to latch onto to enjoy. I thought that had a little bit more energy in it. They have said, Bicep have said in multiple interviews that I've seen, for instance, they did an hour-long co-host with on BBC Radio 1 with Annie Mac on the Annie Mac Future Sounds show, which is really cool. You can check that out on BBC Sounds. And they talk about how this album sort of captures the feeling of being in Belfast, where they grew up, where it's happy and melancholic at the same time, where you got these two feelings sort of like interweaving together, and that's kind of common in dance music, because dance music tends to be written in a minor key.
The last thing I thought when I heard this album was Belfast. So, probably one of the last places in the world that I would associate it with. I didn't know where they're from, so genuinely.
Well, they also said Glasgow as well, because they spent a lot of time in Glasgow, and I can see that because I spent a lot of time in Glasgow as well. And you do get that. It's gloomy, it's cold, it's dark, but at the same time, it's kind of cool, and it's kind of happy, it's kind of quirky,
but
kind of gentrified.
Even with that, there's like 2 or 3 tracks where there's kind of like Indian vocal samples. That's taken me right out of there. I can't associate that with anywhere in the British Isles.
But that was some of the best
samples.
The best material in the album as well.
Those Indian apricots and what was it? Riva, I think, had the Indian vocals.
To be fair, it was a letdown. Both of those tracks are my least favorite tracks for me. But it's just because they had this, like, what I thought was quite cool, like kind of lent into a more modal sound vocal sample, and then what they put with it was still like basic chords and airy, like.
It was a mismatch. It was a mismatch on those tracks. I agree.
More into it. Give me the proper
100%.
Give me a proper sort of Prodigy stuff where you're like, the track feels like it's going to break apart, or
it was like a watered down Prodigy. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought at times.
I'd have loved them to break for me monotony of the album with some just some heavier stuff. It might not be their style, but even if they had some of what you're saying is on the old album, like that 4 to the Floor house stuff, it would have been really nice to then 4 or 5 tracks into this album get something that's a bit modal, a bit not European or American sounding, and then have that like something to break it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if they're playing around with 4 or 5 tracks, you can pick the best of this, obviously within the exact same subgenre. But as you expand that, exactly like Jack said, you need to include the heavier tracks, the faster tempos, the vocal led tracks to then contrast with the instrumental, more like common theme they do. As the track length gets longer, that's where you need this variation.
So you're saying, Jack, that you would have liked it to be a bit more to have a bit more varied in terms of style, which I gotta say is it's a bit surprising coming from a duo. You'd think with a duo they would both sort of play off each other and come up with different ideas, but it's almost as if they're one person.
Yeah, I wonder if they have specific responsibilities in the band. Do you know, like
Yeah.
it wouldn't be as clear cut as this, but if somebody is doing drum and somebody's doing synth production, you're going to get very similar output on each track. Even though they're exploring different areas, you're still going to get like this person's style of drums and this person's style of synth. It could be something like that setup where they're collaborating, but it's not a true like progressive collaboration.
I don't understand how electronic producers like work in groups. I always thought it was odd with Disclosure. Like, I know they're brothers, but I just thought that's like a recipe for disaster if it's not just like one man in a dark room. You know what I mean? just seems like the only way to produce this style of music. But you know, what do I know?
Yeah. So Jack, give us your top 3 tracks.
Okay. Yeah, my top 3 were X. First time I heard it, I was just so happy to hear some vocals. Yeah, like I said, it needed more things like that. It doesn't have to be the Fall to the Floor from House. I'm not a massive House fan either, so maybe I would have hated that. But something to break it up, and the vocals for me were the thing that first broke it up. The sounds at the beginning are really interesting. That like their choice of timbres across this album is great. They've clearly got a really, really good understanding of how to use their equipment, how to select, you know, the VSTs that they're using. They're choosing high quality stuff, and it works together and creates a like uniform end product. It's just not like as out there as I'd like. They're like, but yeah, they're kind of acting with the robotic kind of beeping synth against the glassy synth at the beginning. Was more natural sound. I thought that sort of interplay was really interesting. They use some reverse sounds in there, which to me, not all the time, but during listening to this album, having that reverse sound to pad out the space and make it a bit fuller sounding, it was refreshing to not just have the spacey, airy synths again, to have like a reverse, something else that's that kind of drawing sound. That it's still just padding to flesh it out, but it's something new at least. Saku, we've gone over loads already. Yeah, just a really, really good track. Definitely the best on the album, I think. It's got, we were talking about it not having a drop before as well, but it's got loads of subtle dynamic changes, which I think really, really benefit it. Yeah, they're small changes dynamically, but they're really impactful over the course of the track. And I think having, this is something that they could have...
On Saku?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something they could have pulled out to other tracks, is because they have that vocal, the rest of it doesn't need to change that much, and it remains fresh because they've got that one like melodic idea going all the way through. It's like orchestral material is reused all the time, but what they'll change is either the harmonic content underneath the motif that's repeating, or they'll change the motif and have similar harmonic accompaniment. That's what they've done on Saku. They've got similar harmonic accompaniment, but their melody line is changing as it goes along, so it stays fresh when you're listening to it. Yeah, my final one was Atlas. That I really liked. It was a really strong opening.
I thought so as well.
Yeah. It was one of the heavier tracks on the album. I really like the kind of irregular synth they had at the beginning, where it's like with that like kind of pre-delay where it's being built up to. It sounds like, you know, it's like a robotic.
It's a really interesting rhythm.
Yeah,
that,
I really like that
effect. Yeah,
probably the best. I mean, probably the best melodic content on the whole album. Probably the best melodic synth on the whole album, because there's only about 2 for the rest of the 9 tracks that follow it.
Yeah, just to back that up, I'll go into this a bit more with my worst 3 tracks, but I found like towards the middle, like Lido and X, they kind of got like a bit depressing, a bit spacey. I know you said X was one of your favorites, but that middle album was so depressing.
Lido was basically just an interlude. You don't need that when you have so many tracks that sound similar. You don't need an interlude, like an ambient track like that on there.
Yeah,
it was just a waste of listening minutes.
Yeah, you said like, yeah, Atlas started off so upbeat. Yeah, that's a great way to start it off. But then Yeah, towards that middle, yeah, there's a bit of like Apricots is kind of crappy, and then Saku's all right, and then Lido's like really depressing. It's a bit of a roller coaster towards the middle of the album there. But yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
you were talking about Saku.
Oh yeah, like yeah, I'd agree. Like I think it's telling that I've picked the vocal tracks that stand out to me. I think the rest of the album is like, I think it's fine, but I think there's potential for more. You know,
with a bit of diversity, a bit
yeah.
more development with the melodic lines.
Do we know how old they are?
I think they're about our age. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, I expected them to be younger. It sounds like it's weird because it's quite it's got a quite juxtaposition in it with like being minor and like a bit spacey. It seems mature in like how you have to listen to it to kind of draw out the qualities, but then for me the qualities aren't there if you go seeking them, so it's almost like quite an immature album. I expected them to be younger and like, yeah, they'll be interesting if they develop somewhere.
They're
like
older than us. They're older than us. Actually, no, sorry. That there's so many Andrew Fergusons out there, unfortunately. Because there's one Andrew Ferguson born in 1985 in Glasgow, but that's a footballer, so it's not that Andrew Ferguson. So yeah, Wikipedia doesn't really show their age, but from looking at videos of them, it does look as though they're about probably late 20s, early 30s.
I'd like to see somebody take them under their wing and just like, you know, kind of knock some melody stuff into them, because they've got great soundscapes, they've got great texture. Their harmonic material could be a bit more complex and interesting, but that's not a necessity of the genre. It's just something that like some artists do. So
well, they are based in London now, so now I guess they will be forced into but at the same time, I was going to say they will be forced to develop in that way, but at the same time, with London, you can always find a niche. You can always find a club that caters to your specific audience. So at the same time, they might end up just doubling down.
I think they need to decide what direction they want to go in terms of kind of release formats, because if they're going to be like an album releasing group, which a lot of like electronic artists don't fucking do, right? They need to stray away from having tracks that kind of flow together so well in terms of a mix, and go for the variation, go for the different tempos, and you know, incorporating different genres that won't necessarily work together in a subgenre mix, but it will give a listener more interest. Or if they want to stay in this lane, fine, because the music they're making is high quality, but that they would need to just stick to singles, EPs, and mixes, in my opinion.
Tracks that can be mixed. What about you? Top 3 tracks?
Yeah, so it was funny because as Jack rattled his off, mine, I'll be honest, mine are exactly the same. So Atlas.
We finally agree.
Yeah. Atlas. I mean, you know, as you said, you know, this one stood out as being one of the heavier tracks, but it also had like a really interesting syncopated, like jittery lead synth mixing with like the raspy bass, and then the vocal samples getting layered. It was just a cool way to start it off, and quite hypnotic. Next one on the track list was Saku. As I've already mentioned, this is the standout for me, by far my favorite. As I've already mentioned, like, you know, having the singer take kind of precedence, it just kind of stands out and always piques you interested. And it was just a cool vocal melody. And the one thing I forgot to mention is I love there's a kind of the build up of the really kind of like in the latter half, the kind of square synths that really like overwhelm the track. It sounds sick. It actually reminds me of some shit that Radiohead would do. I don't know if you guys got that vibe on the end of that track, but yeah, by far that was my favorite.
And then Saku.
Yes. So in the latter half, there's like a really like kind of overwhelming like high pitched synth chords that come in.
Yeah, I see.
Have like a vibrato effect to it, and that was one of my favorite kind of sounds on the album.
Very
like
Kid A.
Yeah, and then yeah, the other Clara Lasan track X as well. You know, I like this track for different reasons. I love the kind of how do I the really synthetic metallic like beat at the beginning that kind of juxtaposes against like the analog synths when they come in. It just sounds so fucking cool. This one, the kind of Clara's not really as center stage as on Saku, but the instrumental is interesting enough that doesn't matter too much to me. But yeah, those would be my favorites. Like I said, exactly the same as Jack.
What about, let's go into least favorites, because I'm sure you guys are itching to get into your least favorite tracks. Well, for me, like I said, Lido, thought it was really depressing. X, I actually thought X was a bit boring, but it could be because once I got to that part of the album, as you say,
that beat.
There isn't a bad, yeah, true, but I just found it didn't really change much. It wasn't really evolving. Like melodically, I found it was probably the least sort of melodically evolving track on the album. But at the same time, I could have just been like you guys were saying, that it's so much of the same theme that you become a bit fatigued at that point. And the last one was Apricots, because that vocal sample. I thought the backing track was great, but the vocal sample on top got really grating. And it's probably one that if I am going to listen to this album again, because like I agree with you, Hattie, there's not much bad songs on the album. But this Apricots would probably be one that I skip in the future. So Jack, where's 3 tracks? Enlighten us.
I mean, I didn't make notes on my least favorite tracks, but they were definitely Apricots, Lido, whatever, and you said Reva earlier. I read it as Reva first, but there's no A, so I think Reva is correct.
Okay.
Reva sounds better, so let's dub it Reva.
Yeah, they're just like in fairness to Lido and River, I think they're just a bit like they're just kind of meh. Like they're the ones that fell through the net in a big pool of fish. They're the ones that are just like the fishiest. It's a bit unfair to them. But
one thing I would say on Riva or River, if you re-listen, the rhythmic juxtaposition between the beat and the bass that comes in and out, that's kind of swingy, I do think that's really cool. So that kind of saves the track for me. But maybe give it a re-listen.
It is like, sorry, these every track on this album. This is what another thing that annoyed me. Like originally, I was like, it was something that was keeping me going on my first listen. But now it just annoys me. It's like there is something you can pick out like that from every track.
There's always a cool element,
but it's there for a minute and a half.
Yeah,
and like I'm not like sitting on a sofa in a club, is like zoned out to the music where I can sit and listen to something for a minute and a half without it changing and be like, yeah, this is sick. But like for 15 seconds, for 30 seconds, and then a development or a counter melody or like something like that, sick. But not a whole track. And Apricots is just actively annoying.
It's funny because I think that's one of the singles.
When it starts, I liked it. On the first listen through, I was like, Apricot, it's just
that vocal sample, right? It's just that vocal.
On repeat listens, I can't hack it anymore.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a skip for me. Reva, actually, that was one of my best tracks because I thought you mentioned that that they should have sort of gone to that more traditional house EDM sort of sound and then try and play around with it melodically. I think Reva is the closest thing you'll get to that because it's got that sort of classic house boots and cats.
It's a more straightforward beat,
yeah. It's probably the closest attempt that they did to what you were saying, where they go back to the roots and just create a sort of vanilla, back to basics sort of track, but then play with the melodic line.
The vocal sample or the vocal on that's actually pretty cool. I think I'm warming up to that track more that now we talk about it because it's like the kind of chorus choir vocal is eerie as fuck, which kind of puts me on edge. So I actually like that track a lot now.
That's one thing that they wanted to have more sort of that choral sound, because they wanted, they're Irish, so
Yeah.
they're fans of Irish music.
Yeah. Now I hear it because like I said, I didn't know their origin. Now I hear it on that track. See, that style for me would work so much better with the music. The vocal style works so much better with the music versus them trying to push in the kind of Indian vocal samples that feels out of place with the like the harmonic context.
Yeah, and they do have two long tracks, like I said, Apricots, and did you say Sundial for you had more of those Indian vocal
Sundial was one of the
influences?
other ones that had like a really prominent. Yeah. That had another kind of Indian sample.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah.
I actually found that really annoying. I always find it annoying when there's lyrics that I don't understand. Okay, Hattie, have you given us your worst?
No, I'll go through them now. So again, I'm not going to break the mold too much. Apricots, by far the worst. Exact same opinions on you guys. Like, the instrumental's fine, but the vocal sample just destroys any hope of me re-listening. Lido, again, like I said, this is just an interlude. You don't need this on an album with so many similar tracks. It holds less excitement because there's no tangible like drum beat or anything driving it forward, at least compared to the others. And yeah, probably Sundial. It's again, like I said, kind of the vocal melody's a bit out of place, the vocal sample. Plus, I think it's the fastest tempo track on the album. Now, generally, when I like electronic music, I prefer a kind of mid-slower tempo thing. So this being the fastest is going to be outside of my wheelhouse in terms of personal preference. I'd rather that they slow the BPM down. Just a personal preference.
I did a positive and a negative for the tracks that landed in the middle for this album. My negative for Sundial is that it's got it's like the king of the slow arpeggio shapes I was talking about earlier. They're like a fill in the space, instead of having a proper melody. And I've written slow arpeggio shape takes over after 1 minute 30, lasts till, and then I just gave up waiting for it to end before I even finished my note.
Yeah.
Last till you can remember where you are in the track.
Yeah, well, yeah, last till fur, whatever track comes next.
Yeah, cool. Like, let's rank this album. Where we'd put it. I think I have already an idea of where we'd put it on our tier list, on our rating list.
Should we explain the tiers for new
that one?
Sure.
Listeners / watchers.
Wait, sure. Give me a shout when.
It's been so long since we went to the actual album review page that I just fully forgot which one it was.
It's been a hot minute since we've done an album.
It has been. We're on it now.
Come on, release your shit, music artists of the world. You've got so many like underground indie artists being like, please listen.
Yeah, literally. So our ranking goes from the very top being GOAT, or Mind Blown, just mind-blowing albums that right up there with the greatest of all time, all the way down to trash. Trash is just throw it in the bin, not good enough. In between, beneath GOAT, beneath the greatest of all time, we've got Fire. Beneath that, we've got Pat on the Back. You did a good job, pat on the back, good effort. Beneath that, you've got Scratch CD. It's about as good as a Scratch CD. And beneath that, you've got Participation Ribbon. Thanks for coming. Thanks for participating. You're not as bad as trash, but here's a participation ribbon. So I'll kick it off. I actually thought this album was fire. Like I said, I thought this was...
That is the hottest take I've ever heard in my life, Dennis.
I thought this was a really good album for winter.
How much are they paying you?
He suggests the album. He gives it an amazing review. What's this shill? This shill life.
Are these guys on Sony or something? Have you been paid the big bucks?
I don't know. I think it's because I was familiar with Bicep before anyway. I like their sound. I like the sort of melancholic vibe that they put out, and I didn't mind having that for an hour or 50 minutes or however long this album is, except for Lido, which got a little bit too deep. And I thought it was perfect for winter. I thought going out, it's being overcast, it's dark. This is a great winter album, I think.
I would
I really don't get Winter because, like I said, with the tracks that have Indian vocal samples and stuff, it kind of takes me out of that kind of cold vibe. I know not all the tracks have that, but I don't know.
Not so much cold, but just melancholic, depressing.
I'm
Yeah.
going to be
Overcast.
pissed
I
if
can
we
see
put
it.
this any higher than Scratch CD.
Well, I'm going to be overtaken anyway. This is going in my repertoire, but I'm sure it's not going to be with you guys.
Might be the biggest deviation between our.
This is easily worse than Gorillaz, Deftones, and Mr. Bungle. This is debatably worse than Meg the Stallion.
So where are you putting this then, Jack?
Disappoint me, Jack.
Lock it in.
I'd honestly, they made an album. They made an album.
So you're going to give it the first ribbon?
Then they released that album, but it had about 2 songs on it, and they just split it between 10 different songs. So that's about as good as I can give it personally.
So
I would accept a Scratch CD as a compromise, depending where Hattie lands on it.
Don't let me.
Yeah.
Oh no! I'd put it in the participation ribbon. I don't think it's fully trash. Their control of electronic instruments was very nice. The soundscapes they made was great. The timbres they chose were fantastic. The material that they put out with all of those positives that they generated was subpar.
Okay, so we got fire from Dennis and a ribbon from Jack. You guys.
Yeah,
quite a disparity.
This is amusing. Okay, so I was and ahhing between tiers, but upon repeated listens, I'm gonna have to go with Scratch CD. I couldn't put it any lower because it is enjoyable. There's a lot of good stuff here. It just doesn't justify its length or the album format. I can pick a couple of tracks and really enjoy them and forget the rest. So, they make good music and there's a lot of effort and detail that goes into it. It just I can't justify it across a 50-minute runtime without them diversifying the sound or including more features that are more prominent, like I've already mentioned. So, yeah, I'm going to go Scratch CD.
So you can pick out some tracks and enjoy them. Would you say the same thing about Megan Thee Stallion?
Yes.
And so is this sort of similar to that? There are a couple of tracks like that.
Yeah, it would be on that tier where I'd pick maybe a third of the tracks on the album and could listen to them repeatedly enjoyably. I would consider the same for Megan Thee Stallion. Yes, obviously that was a longer album, but there'll probably be more tracks from that I can pick out. So yeah, I'd put them on par for my personal enjoyment. Yeah.
Well, for a final rating, I would say this probably should go on Scratch CD because I put it so high, Jack put it so low. If we split the difference, we can go on Scratch CD. And Jack, you said you were right with it going in that field.
Yeah,
the consensus weighting would put it in Scratch CD because me and Jack on the lower end.
I heard you give it the fire. I knew I'd have to come up from the ribbon, but it's definitely not a backpack. It's not on the level of those albums we've got there.
Well, initially I was and ahhing between Scratch CD and Backpack because like I said, I did enjoy it, so I kind of feel bad putting an album that I enjoy in the lower third.
Bungle's probably the weakest of the Backpacks, I think, because it's so one.
I would listen to this over Bungle.
I'd listen to Bungle before I listen to this any day of the week. The extra tracks on Gorillaz by themselves are a better album than this is. Deftones was groove centric and it had similar tracks throughout, but it was more diverse than this was. I think each of those albums has some kind of edge on this one.
I still think we underrated Deftones and overrated Bungle, just as our consensus is, but that's by the by now.
You very much didn't rate Bungle, but that was one where we had to come to a consensus as well. So you guys are happy with coming to a consensus with Scratch CD?
Well, Scratch CD, that's the democratic medium between our rankings, I would say. Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts on the albums, Hattie?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm definitely intrigued, and I will check out singles, standalone tracks from them in the future, and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy them. But again, they need to diversify the sound to keep me interested for an hour, an hour album.
I would say, yeah, from this discussion, I would agree with that they do need to diversify the styles that they choose. But I would also say that I very much enjoyed this album. The reason why I rate this as 5 is because this is going in my repertoire. This will be my
You're going to keep
listening
to this.
Yeah, this will be my winter comfort listening. So yeah, come at me, guys.
Again, I wanted to say I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, but I'm glad we tackled something in a completely different genre to everything else. I enjoy the fact that we're looking at all kind of aspects of music. So if someone else comes along in a similar style, I'd be game for doing it.
For sure.
It just reminds me of the background music for vlogs. I can imagine Dennis being
harsh,
like,
bro. That's fucking harsh.
Just because Dennis, because he keeps mentioning winter, I just imagine him like opening his front door and he's there and he's like, "Hey guys, it's the first snow of winter. Look at it." In the background, you've got where going on in the background.
If only it wasn't licensed. If only it was it was open free domain. I can't remember what the actual legal term is.
It's just the Matrix soundtrack. Like, real fucking soft. That'll be my lasting impression from this.
Oh yeah, if I heard one of these songs in a movie, that shit would go off. That shit would go off.
I don't think it would though. Like none of these tracks, have a moment now where I can be like, "Oh, you remember when happened?" Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no like, "Oh, it's Hangar 18 solo," or like when Happy first came out and it was like the song of the summer. Do you know what I mean? Like there's none of that potential on here.
Yeah, and Happy was always trash. What are you talking about? One of Pharrell's most dark moments.
That's an unpopular opinion given how much it was played, is all I'm saying. Like,
true. Right, let's bring this to a close, guys. Thank you for listening. Those were the objective opinions. I hope you enjoyed. We are on Twitter. We're on YouTube as well. Feel free to comment. Tell us your opinions as well. We'd love to get your opinions and just to keep the discussion going. At us at Twitter. What's the Twitter there, Hadi?
TRP_POD.
TRP_POD. Let us know what you think. And
like and subscribe to the video.
Please like and subscribe. And thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Peace.